When I was 16 years old, I read a book that would change my life. Action Comics. In the early 2000s, DC Comics' longest-running comic book, Action Comics, which stars Superman, published a story called What's So Funny About Truth and Justice in the American Way. In it, a new group of super vigilantes called the Elite challenge Superman, not in that dueling two superheroes fighting sort of way, but in an ideological sense. This team is popular because they kill, and they use excessive force to execute their opponents. And when confronted by Superman, they jeer at him, and they tell him that his model of compassion and restrained strength is outdated, that he is no longer necessary or relevant, and that bluntly, he can never save the world because his morality is not a part of this world. And in response, as this team of killers and Superman come to blows, it appears that at first the Elite has the upper hand and will defeat the Man of Steel. And then, to our horror, Superman snaps, and one by one brutally, efficiently dispatches each member of this opposing team in terrible ways, and the leader is left begging for his life before Superman reveals that it was all a ruse, that these other vigilantes are fine. They're unconscious and defeated, but fine, and that he had only ever pretended to succumb to bloodthirsty and brutality because Superman lives for a dream. He lives for a dream of dignity and honor and justice, and that embracing cruelty and losing morality to achieve his dream would just leave it unfulfilled forever. It teaches us that heroism is holding on to your dreams and your morals and your principles, even and especially when they are challenged. Joseph, the hero of our story for the last few weeks, is a complicated character. And I think, and to be fair, the music is phenomenal, but Joseph gets simplified due to Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat into a musical good guy. But he's more complicated and challenging to read than he does appear in the broad strokes of a musical. As we know from previous weeks, Joseph is a challenged young man. Elie Wiesel points out that Joseph is a bit bratty, but can you blame him? Here is a child who watched his mother die, who leans into the close relationship with his father and then is punished for it and bullied for it by the brothers who cannot find a single kind word to say to this boy. They openly hate him. They don't see a lonely boy who's lost his mother, who has nobody but his father to relate to. They only see a spoiled, favored kid with head in the clouds, a kid that's so busy dreaming that he can't even survive in the waking world. And so we take that young, lonely, traumatized boy, and they throw him into a pit. They beat him up, and they take away his most beloved possession, the coat that we could almost read as a safety blanket, and then they sell him into slavery. And while these initial sections of Genesis describe those events in relatively distant third-party terms, in later weeks, we learn that Joseph begged, he pleaded with his brothers not to do this with him. His brothers, years later, are now before an Egyptian lord of majesty. They have no idea it's their same brother, and they cry out, "Alas, we are being punished on account of our brother because we looked on to his anguish. We paid him no heed as he begged us, as he pleaded for his life." And if we were to put aside the fact that we know how this story ends, and that it ends with a happy family reunion and the stage being set for the great tale of the Exodus and the redemption, we could, if we wanted to, lose ourselves in the high drama and in the cliffhangers of the Joseph narrative. We don't know, while reading, what Joseph's plan is. Is he hoping to seek revenge? Or Could we define this as justice? Will he overcome his worst impulses to harm those who hurt him? Or is this the great reward coming from God, who is delivering tormentors into his waiting hands? The story does not need to be a happily ever after. It can be much more a Count of Monte Cristo, another classic tale of revenge and power reversals, of innocence sold into slavery, long simmering vendettas, measure for measure, eye for an eye. And in fact, if we take our critical eye, we notice that Joseph has often employed the model of measure for measure in his own life. Just as he was imprisoned and accused of a crime he did not commit, now he too frames his brother Simeon and imprisons him for crimes he is innocent of. As Joseph was sold for a handful of silver coins, he in turn fills his brother's bags with filled silver coin purses. That silver, which they once lusted for, becomes their source of greatest fear. Where did the silver come from? Will they think we are thieves? Will they think we are spies? Will they think we are criminals? Silver coins, and then a silver cup for Benjamin. Silver is the color of betrayal in this story, and it is everywhere, as inescapable as the guilt the brothers carry, and that it might seem Joseph is fixated upon. He was enslaved by his brothers. He was enslaved by Potiphar. And now, measure for measure, is Joseph going to return the favor, now that power is his? Ultimately, Joseph forgives his brothers. He openly reveals himself to them. He weeps with them. He embraces them. He gives them a good life, a sanctuary from the famine, a new land to call home. But his brothers cannot shake the feeling of impending doom. Is this too just part of a grand plan of vengeance? As we read in our Haftarah, thousands of years in the future, David's enemies, they too think that they are safe. And here comes Solomon to strike them down once David is gone. Now, the brothers do not know the story of David and Solomon, but perhaps Joseph is just waiting for Jacob to die. As soon as their father is not there to witness it, Joseph will finally reveal his true colors. And yet, despite the high literary drama and our inability to read Joseph without reading ahead in the story, Joseph's true colors, it turns out, are exactly what we hope that they will be. He is, in fact, a shining paragon of faith and forgiveness and mercy. He's just as good as we hope for. It's so good, in fact, that his brothers, like the villains from that comic book I alluded to earlier, they just can't believe it. How can a man hold on to his values and morals after so much suffering and loss? How can you give up on revenge when you have the power to take it? The answer comes from our Torah portion, Ki tachat Elohim ani. Joseph asks, am I a replacement for God? Joseph, for all his power, does not want to wield it to see a crueler world. Joseph knows that he has the power to break and shatter his family, to fulfill the deepest and worst wishes of his heart, and he also has the wisdom to know he lacks God's insight. He knows that he cannot tell if this is justice or if it is revenge. He does not know if it is the right thing for him to do. Can he take his justice, or will avenging himself throw away everything he has worked so hard to build up within himself and in the world? Rabbi Shai Held teaches, as a young man, Joseph dreamed of his brothers bowing to him and of him lording himself over them. And now that that dream has been fulfilled, he rejects it, and he chooses instead to embrace his brothers. He makes unequivocally clear that he has no illusion of being God. He has no need for his brothers to be his servants or his slaves. And sometimes people achieve greatness through the use of power. But in this remarkable moment, Joseph finds a different kind of greatness. He finds majesty in restraint. Which brings us back to Superman. Superman and Joseph both have the power to destroy the lives of those with whom they disagree and those who have hurt them. And both refuse because they embrace the majesty of restraint. And that is why we consider both of them heroes. That's why we consider them to be symbolic examples and protectors of dreams, because they offer us dreams of forgiveness and dreams of mercy and dreams of peace. And in a world where that dream is called into question every single day, to hold on to that dream of mercy and peace and forgiveness, that requires heroism, and that requires strength all its own. Chazak, chazak v'nitchazek. From strength to strength, may you be strengthened, and may that strength be the ever new and ever ancient strength of mercy, of compassion, and restraint. Shabbat shalom.